Well, I already made a video about Grandma and Grandpa Dakin here, but I gotta shorten it up because there are people there with a short attention span. I'm gonna shorten it up a little bit and take some flaws out of there because we puffed it up a little bit to make it more of an interesting video. But anyway, I'll tell you about my mom and dad first. The two sides of the family, the Levesque side and the Laviolette side. Now the Laviolette side, well, my two grandparents, they lived in New Brunswick and they knew each other. And this was at the beginning of the 1900s, way early in the century, and they heard about logging. There's jobs in BC, so them and some brothers and friends, they jumped on the train and was headed to BC, and sure enough, there's lots of work out here, and the weather was a lot nicer too. They didn't want to ever go back. Well, they started logging, and my two grandfathers, they worked in Squamish and for this guy, and they had a poker game, and they won the donkey off of their boss, and they started logging on their own. And then they logged for a while and went off on their own and did some logging. My grandfather Laviolette, you see, he was from New Brunswick, but actually his grandparents, my grandparents, way back, they actually, that first Laviolette came over from France. He landed in Montreal, settled there. There was 350 people there in Montreal, that's all. He was tanning hides there. In 1755, the British came and took all the land away from the French people in New Brunswick. And so Judy and I just happened to be in New Brunswick when they had Acadian Congress. That's when the French were whining and snotting them. They wanted their land back. And so there was a list, a big long list, a big book with all the names of all the people that lived in New Brunswick that lost their land. And I looked up the name Laviolette. It wasn't even in the book. So I guess the Laviolette, my great-grandfather, whoever he was, moved from Montreal to New Brunswick after 1755 somehow and bought some land there, and they had a Laviolette farm. So that's the Laviolette side of the family. Well, except for one thing, they were logging in Scott Cove with his brother-in-law, Art McIntyre, and they had a flume and everything else, and it was quite an operation, but the Depression hit and everything fell apart, and so they moved to Echo Bay and built a little hotel on an island. And grandfather Fidel Laviolette, he died in 1947. My grandmother, she stayed on at the hotel and ran the hotel for years and years and years and years. I really liked her. Nanny, we called her. And anyway, she collected native art, and that's what got me into native art. You know, she had it upstairs in the attic and all around the walls in the pub and everything else. And I imagine she just traded beer for artwork. Anyway, that's the Laviolette side of the family. Now we'll get to the Levesque side of the family, Mom's side of the family. So there's my grandfather, Amity Levesque, and he married, this is actually their wedding picture. He married Sybil Dakin, and they met in Squamish when he was logging in Squamish. So she was just new to Canada. She moved here when she was 9, I think it was, to Vancouver. Grandpa Dakin, he had a different family. He moved to Vancouver once before, but his wife there didn't like it there, so she took off back to England, and then she died. And so he met Sarah, and then they got married, and that's when Grandma was born. But Sarah already had a daughter, and Margaret. And so when they moved to Squamish, Aunt Margaret stayed in Vancouver and worked in a department store, and she had a boyfriend there, so she didn't move to Squamish with them. But anyway, that's where they met. And Grandpa Dakin, in his later years, he went blind and he had to go to a home, and he died in 1927. And Grandma Dakin, she died in 1945, and she was buried in Alert Bay. But I never did know where Grandpa Dakin was buried, and Mom never told me. I don't know if Mom knew where he was buried either. So I asked Philip, my brother, if he knew where Grandpa Dakin was buried. So he looked it up, and he found out he's buried in Vancouver with no headstone. So Phil, he got a real nice headstone made up for Grandpa Dakin, and I asked him if he could ask them to save me some dirt. So I didn't dig up the dirt. They saved me some dirt from the grave. And so the idea was I was going to take it to Alert Bay and put it on her grave, and then take some dirt from her grave and put it on his grave. I don't know. It was just a thing I felt like I had to do. And so, I put it off and never, I wanted to try to get a whole bunch of relations together to make a little ceremony, but, that's impossible to do. You can hardly get anybody together just to talk. But anyway, we pulled it off. And so this is a video of doing that. Here are their wedding pictures. They eloped. They went up to Prince Rupert. And the thing is, it was right in the middle of that Spanish flu. And Prince Rupert, they didn't want anybody coming off the boat that had the flu. And apparently they heard that there was the flu on that boat, so they wouldn't let the boat land. And Granddad told me, he says, he waited until midnight and he told the captain of the boat that just pull into the wharf there and we'll all jump off. And they did. But a few of them had the flu. Grandma had the flu really bad. She almost died. Apparently there was a guy by the name of Dada Solvay, fed her oranges, and that saved her life, she figured. Actually, Granddad was working in the Queen Charlotte Islands at the time, so I guess they were going to go to Prince Rupert, then take a boat over to the Queen Charlottes. I don't know, go from there. So anyway, I'm going to tell you a little story about putting the dirt on their graves.
Over. Yeah. How are you going to take the dirt back?
Well, we won't take as much dirt. Okay. So everybody take a handful of dirt. Don't put it right on the cement. Just put it along the side. Okay? I think that would...
You have to be right there. I think your heart would be right about there.
Your heart would be right about there.
Mama.
Grandma Dakin's grave in Alert Bay. Plus a rock from Cormorant Island. Well, there you go. Now you guys are together again.
He was born, see, 1849. That's 100 years before I was born.